guys! So, before I delve into the video, I just want to ramble a little bit. So first, I have 200 subscribers as of today. I think I got maybe 10 new subscribers within the past 2 weeks since joining BookTube, so that's exciting. Hi, new people. I also just wanted to talk about how freaking full I am and how much work went into getting this video done. I recorded 50 minutes of words this morning on my iPad, and then there was this weird screeching noise in the background, and I didn't want to try to figure out how to get rid of that, or that just seemed like a lot of extra work. But, I mean, I guess it's arguable when compared with re-recording the entire video. But, whatever. I have tea, I have a full tummy, and we're just gonna hope for the best. So, I was going to name this something catchy originally, like 3 books in as many days, or 3 good romances in as many days or something, and then I realized that I've read 4 romances, and just the cutesy title just goes out the window, and I mean, I don't know. I'll figure out what to call this in the meantime. But I've read some romances in the past couple of days, and I have enjoyed them all to varying degrees. They range from 5 stars to 3.75 stars. I'll explain that one. That one is actually my least favorite. I still enjoyed it, but yeah. So I'm going to start with the book that I rated 5 stars, and it's not necessarily my favorite, but it's not my favorite. I think it was just about the time that I read it. I read it, I was struggling to sleep, and I was just, thinking a lot of morbid things, and I was like, okay, I need a cutesy romance, and it did a really good job at that. So this first book is Girl at Heart by Kelly Oram, and so it follows It follows Charlie Hastings, who is a senior in high school. She is also a baseball player. She has 4 best guy friends. One of them is like a brother to her. She was raised by her father, as her mother passed away when she was about 6. And when her father was out either playing baseball with the Pittsburgh Pirates, that's what they're called, right? When he was out playing for them or working with them, he does some sort of media for them or something. I'm not exactly sure what his job is, but whenever he was out, Charlie would be watched by her grandfather. So this means she was raised by a lot of men and was just always around men, and she didn't really think of herself as a tomboy per se, but she just did, she just didn't do girly things because she didn't know how. She didn't know how to girl. And the book opens as she's about to tell her crush that she's in love with him. Her crush happens to be one of her best friends, so there's that struggle of should I tell him, because this friendship might get weird, but she's like, nope, I'm gonna do it. And then she finds out that he and her other best friends are all heading to the prom. And no one told her about it. They just assumed that she didn't want to go because, Charlie, she doesn't do a lot of boyish stuff.
Hey, girly, blame that full tummy I mentioned earlier.
She's just one of the guys, and while she's always been hyper aware of the fact that she's a girl, as all of the guys, they have their careers set out for them. They're going to be scouted, or they have no plans to do baseball in college. Charlie, as a girl, is likely not to get a scholarship or to hear from anyone, as it's not impossible or it's not unheard of for women to be scouted and join baseball teams and all that good stuff, but it is very rare. And while her best friend is kind of aware of that, I feel like everybody is always just yeah, no, but you're gonna get it. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be great. You're gonna get it.
Even with the ridicule the team faced for having one girl on the team, no one really seemed to notice that, which I think she appreciated to some extent, but she still had long blonde hair that she had to wear in a ponytail whenever she played. And she had sizable boobs, which, side note, I really appreciated, because everybody talks about underrepresentation in terms of race. I had underrepresentation in terms of boob size. It was always the mean girls who had big boobs, and as a teenager and now, I have always had a sizable chest, if you will, and so it was just nice having this representation that I didn't see. And she was happy with her boob size. It wasn't oh my god,
But for her, at the very least, she's going to stay in sports and study sports medicine and that kind of thing. So this sort of sparks a very light-hearted romance between her and the captain of the team. He is around when she has a breakdown over not being feminine enough, and she quits the team, and he offers to have his twin sister, who is like super girly, super nice, super friendly, teach her how to girl. And they joke about her becoming baseball Barbie, and it was really nice just watching her sort of come to terms with her femininity, watching her friends come to terms with the fact, like, yes, she is a girl and she can still be your best friend, and it's not cool to joke about her thunder thighs, which is why she was self-conscious and never thought she could wear skirts or shorts and things like that. And it was so, I think the other thing that I really liked is the close relationship she had with her dad. It was so cute, and just, I think the best word to describe this is just cute, adorable. Like, it was a really good book. It was really what I needed, and I really enjoyed it. I would definitely recommend it. Also, I haven't read a white romance in a while, and the diversity in this book was implied by the names of some of the characters. Like, someone was Diego. One of them was a little ambiguous. I was like, maybe he's black, maybe not. This last name is throwing me off. But in junior high, I would often Google like fantasy books with non-white heroines or whatever with non-white heroines. And I would do this like every couple of months because it was like, okay, this is great, but I'm just seeing the same tropes. I'm not seeing the Caribbean reflected at me. I'm not seeing like an African-American story reflected at me. And so when it comes to just straight up romance, I definitely feel like there were just too many tropes. I was only ever reading the tropes, like the time period, the occupations, the ages may have changed, but I still felt like I was reading the same 3 or 4 stories. And so after having read a bunch of diverse books and now coming back to just non-diverse romance, I could appreciate it for what it was, rather than just being annoyed and being like, oh, I know how this is going to end and all of that good stuff. So definitely a recommendation. I gave it 5 stars. Yeah, the next book on my list is The Henna Wars by Adiba Jaigirdar. I hope I pronounced her last name correctly. So I gave it 4 stars because it takes place in Ireland, and I listened to the audiobook, and while the narrator did great Bangladeshi accents, I felt a little removed from the story as she just sounded American and it took place in Ireland. And I never forgot that it took place in Ireland, but I did wish that the accents just reflected the way the people around her sounded. Sometimes it was a little weird to hear her talk about an Irish thing, like their schooling system, in an American accent, and that took me out of it a little bit. There are also a few parts that, I don't know, I just wasn't drawn in per se, which is why I knocked it down a star, but I ultimately really did love this book. Which sounds weird, I guess. Like, I don't know if that makes sense per se, but yes, that's how I felt. So the book follows Nishat, who is, I'm not sure exactly how old she is, but I'm assuming around 16, 17. It opens as she comes out to her parents. She sees this wedding happening. She sees the love that's happening between the family members or close family friends who are getting married. And she's just like, I want to have that someday. I'm going to tell my parents. And she's met with silence, and the relationship is super strained after that. And her parents sort of have this idea that, well, you know, it's just a phase. You know, these Western girls, we're in the West now, we're an island. She sees this, it's just going to be a phase. Her mom at one point even tells her, like, you just have to decide against it. You would decide to have to do otherwise. But I love that Nishat always stands very firm in who she is and her beliefs, even when she's like, damn, like, should I not have told them? But you know what? It's better that I did, and I'm just going to deal with it because this is who I am. She has such a great relationship with her younger sister, even when they fight. Even it was such a nice depiction of a sibling relationship. Like, they weren't constantly arguing. I feel like a lot of times in books they emphasize the part of the sibling relationship where the siblings are constantly fighting, and it was nice to see them. Yes, they fought, obviously, because that's what siblings do, but they were always there for each other, always cuddling, always. It was really nice. Okay, so about the book itself. As I said, Nishat is in Ireland. Her family is from Bangladesh. She is Muslim, and this is brought up more than once as the family friend who's getting married. I think her name was Sunny. She when her mom enlists her to come talk to Nishat, she's like, but like, listen, Muslim girls aren't lesbians, so what you doing? You gotta stop this. Maybe you're confused. Again, the whole thing about the West, maybe, but like that's not a thing. And Nishat's like, excuse me, you're talking about what Muslim girls are and aren't. How devout are you? When was the last time you said your prayers? And Sunny's like, yeah, but that's not the point, because at the end of the day, we don't want to be an embarrassment to our families. Not being as prayerful, not saying our prayers 5 times a day, not doing, like, that's something that we can keep to ourselves, keep in the safety of our home. But this lesbianness thing, like, everybody's gonna see that. That's not okay. And Nishat's like, yeah, okay, thanks, but no thanks, bye. And she starts to fall for this girl at her school, Flavia, who is Brazilian and Irish. But of course, there's an obstacle between them. They have a business competition for their grade where there's a €1,000 prize. I think it was €1,000 for the winner of the competition. Nishat decides to start a henna business, and so does Flavia. And Nishat gets very upset because she's like, you're culturally appropriating. And so this was one of the things that I really enjoyed. I loved this exploration of cultural appropriation between not white cultures. Even one of Nishat's friends at some point is like, but she's African American. And it's like, sweetie, you're in Ireland. She's not African American. And I don't know if she's been to America. And so just this obsession with political correctness and this discomfort by a lot of white people to acknowledge when there is some sort of cultural appropriation going on, some sort of like racial, just anything. And there seems to be such a big discomfort in just saying black. Like, people seem to, you have to have this distance, you have to be African American or something. There just seems to be such a discomfort with the word black, and it's so interesting to me. So yeah, I loved how this was explored. I also loved a lot of the cultural discussions. You know, why is it okay? Ireland is overrun with burritos and donuts right now. I also think it's interesting how Mexican culture just is everywhere.
I'm also aware of the fact that the burrito has 2 different forms. There's like a more traditional Mexican version and the Tex-Mex version, so I don't know which one she means is popular. And this could be interesting. Maybe this is more about the pervasiveness of American culture rather than Mexican culture or American ideals. And I'm not sure exactly where I'm going with this. Someone should do like research on, the pervasiveness of America and our effects on other people's cultures. Anyway, also something that I was trying to get across earlier is that Flavia is Black Brazilian, and African Americans have a lot of culture, for lack of a more fitting phrase. There's a lot of depth to our culture, but there are a lot of other Afro-based cultures as well. And by being like African American, or sort of forcing, not saying black or not acknowledging that she is Brazilian and Afro-Brazilian and has her own type of heritage, I think she's Black Brazilian anyway, is sort of just sweeping a lot of the African experience under the rug. And I think that's what a lot of people do because it's a lot easier that way.
Everything is burrito and donuts, but South Asian food is like, girls at school start rumors about her, and it's like, why? What makes one minority better or different or more accessible or tolerable than the other? I also liked a lot of nods to different things. So in the wedding ceremony, Nishat's like, this is what happens when you give into white culture, and she has to eat with like a fork and knife, and she's like, this is so weird. Like, this is going to be so unwieldy when we normally would just eat with our hands. And it's very interesting, the things that a lot of people do to assimilate, and it's interesting to see the different perspectives of someone who's okay with it versus someone who's not. I also personally loved, so in the Caribbean, my mom's from the Caribbean, there is a lot of cultural blending. Predominantly, the African slaves are brought over, then we have European culture, but there's also a very strong South Asian influence in a lot of areas, particularly Trinidad. And so there were a lot of foods that either I appreciated her talking about and I could relate to, like dal puri, but also that I just enjoyed because I love South Asian food, so biryani. And it just also made me nostalgic as I'm not dorming because of the whole corona situation. Living in Manhattan, a very white borough, I didn't have a lot of Caribbean food around me, and so the closest I could get, unless, I went home or my mom brought me some food or something, or I went to Harlem or whatever, was with South Asian food, and getting the same, like, or similar flavor profiles. And so that was great. That was just, like, really fun reading about. There were things that I was not aware of that sounded delicious that I looked up and all that good stuff. But anyway, so ultimately I really liked this book. I liked how proud Nishat was of herself, and while she did struggle sometimes, she never once wanted to back down. She never once wanted to be like, okay, well, you're right, Muslim girls can't be lesbians, I'm just going to just go hide in my corner and that's fine and whatever. It was also really cute when I love this nod to, like, immigrant parents. Even my mom, like, coming from the English speaking Caribbean, whenever there's something that she's not fully aware of, she'll just, like, completely mess up the name. So Nishat's mom at some point talks about Ellen DeGeneres, and she calls her Helen, and I forget what the last name is, and I'm just like, oh man, you gotta love immigrant parents. I also love just the confusion that can arise from being homosexual. Like, there's one point where she and Flavia are making intense eye contact, and she's like, is there a heterosexual explanation for why this is happening? Like, am I reading too much into this? I don't want to be labeled, or, like, I don't want to misstep here. And there is, I will say, like, an outing. She gets outed to the entire school, and when people are upset, she's just like, I mean, yes, or when people are like, like, why aren't you more upset? You should hide it, you should this. And yes, she's upset, but she's also like, this is who I am. And if I make a big deal of it, it's almost as though I'm saying, like, I'm ashamed of who I am, or this should have been quieted, this should have been. So I love that. I loved how all of this was handled. And so I gave it 4 stars, even 4.5 stars. As I said, I was taken out of the story a little bit by the audiobook. This was really long. I'm sorry. Okay, the next book I have is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. This was another 4-star read for me. It follows Liz Leidy, who is from a small town in Indiana. She wants to go to Pennington College on a music scholarship. She does not get this scholarship, and so now she needs to raise the money because she's panicked that her grandparents will want to sell the house, and she's like, I don't want this to happen. We cannot sell this house. This is, memories are here. This is our place. So she decides, or gets talked into, joining the running for prom queen. She gets in the running. She joins the campaign. What is the right phrasing for this? She decides to run for prom queen, and her school is very intolerant of a lot of things. Small town Indiana. You can't buy tickets as a homosexual couple. You can't run for prom court as someone who's gender neutral. I feel like there was a stipulation about like running as the gender you're born with. I don't remember, but you have to have a gender. You can't be gender neutral. And Liz is a lesbian. She is also black. She is also a she. And women often get more flack for a lot of things, like, as a black woman, than black men do. And the feminine aspect of her, her being a woman doesn't play too much a part as she's running for prom court, and that's a whole thing. But it does appear in an embarrassing incident that she has in 9th grade that sort of affects the rest of her high school career. She hides herself away. She's, like, really nervous about putting herself out there because she doesn't want to have this experience again. A few of the Goodreads reviews I saw, people were like, they didn't really see the race aspect. They saw more of, like, the problems of being a queer woman than being a black woman. And the incident in 9th grade, I think, was enough. I feel like people sometimes underestimate how hard it is to be a person of color. One comment, especially, like, the incident that happened, one comment or one like gesture can really be damaging, especially if you don't really see yourself reflected in the people around you. You don't see role models. You don't see people like you who express themselves like you that are also accepted, especially when a friendship sort of ends over it. It's like someone that was close to you is now rejecting you for something that makes you you. And so I completely understood why she was kind of just really introverted for the next few years. And this was another story similar to Girl at Heart, where it was somebody else sort of coming into her own, except in a different way. Liz started to make more friends, started to see that she's funny, that she can like socialize, and that was really cool. But on to the romance aspect of the story. So she starts to find herself attracted to a running mate, a fellow prom queen, except there's that whole thing about women not being able to, or same-sex couples not being able to take each other to the dance. Also, most people don't know, her family knows, and I also loved how accepting they were. There was one comment her grandfather makes where he says something like, you know, okay, that's great, that's wonderful, but like, do we have to stop going to Chick-fil-A? Because like, that chicken though was really good. And I love that. I love that nod to one, popular culture. I also loved the fact that they were just like, yeah, okay, this is great, but like, on to the important things. Their sexuality, that's fine, do you, boo. But Chick-fil-A though, this was also another instance where there was like a really great familial relationship. The fact her Liz and her brother Robert, they had such a good close relationship, and then they they bickered, and there was like stuff going on. Robert is sick, and Liz sometimes feels like she has to shoulder all of the burden of taking care, or not all of it, but she has to shoulder a lot for taking care of him, as he is sick with the same disease that killed their mother. And you know, it was just so well done, and it still managed to be relatively light while still dealing with some heavy topics, so that was something that I did enjoy. This is another book where someone is outed. Liz tries really hard to keep it under wraps, as her friends also know, but her friends are like, yeah, listen, so don't start cozying up to this girl, we hear that she's gay, and you know, but she's like out there gay, like unlike you, like, you know, like, it's okay that you're gay, that's fine, but like, you know that it's not cool to really talk about that in our town. So yeah, and you know that your ratings are gonna go down, so let's just keep it under wraps, stay in the closet right now while you get the scholarship money. Okay, cool, great. And Liz definitely struggled with that, but I loved how things turned out for her. I loved how when she took the campaign from her friend, and it wasn't just her friend's pet project, it was now her campaign, and she was putting her energy into it. I really loved how this story unfolded, and I loved the final like scene in the prom, and I love just like the friendships that she has, and some of them are a bit toxic, and it gets complicated, but I love like the notes of hope for her friendships at the end. I did wish that we learned more about Gabby's life story. That's one of her friends. I wish that we had learned a bit more about the other characters, and that's one of the reasons why it wasn't a 5-star read for me, because I thought this was so good, but I thought that it could also have been better, or there could have been more could have been delved into it. One of the girls who is basically racist, I think that could have been fleshed out a bit more too. Like, she could have done more, not necessarily overt, because racism can be very discreet, definitely, without a doubt, and you can definitely see the other issues in the school when one of the staff members reminds Liz like, hey, you'll be our first black prom queen, so stay in line. But I don't know, there were definitely things that I feel like could have been fleshed out more, but I loved this book. Like, I think this is a great book to have. This is a great book for whether you're coming out or working on coming out. Like, I feel like both of these stories, both Henna Wars and You Should See Me in a Crown, are great. I feel like they're stories that need to be there. Stories that I probably would not have imagined. How old am I? 23? Like, yeah, I'm 23, right? Almost 24. Okay. Like, a few years ago, like, yes, there were more diverse books coming out, but still just not enough. And it's so awesome to see so much of this happening, so many of these stories being put out there. Whew, okay, finally we have Easy by Tamara Weber. So I gave this 3.75 stars, which is really specific, but it wasn't quite 5 stars for me, though I did like it. I just didn't love it. So, bit of a trigger warning. This has to do with sexual assault. It follows, what was her name? Jacqueline. I keep almost forgetting her name, which is another reason why it doesn't rate too highly for me, but it was still like pretty good. Jacqueline is assaulted and she is saved by this guy, and it sort of follows their romance, and it's really interesting to see. There's a whole like subplot where she's like sending flirty emails back and forth with her tutor. She almost failed her chemistry, bio, some type of science class. She almost failed some class because she was like really depressed over her boyfriend, and they have the same class and all this good stuff. And I felt more of a chemistry with the emails than I did a lot of the times in person. It wasn't really until the end of the book that I really felt the romance, which is another reason why it wasn't, even it didn't make it to 4 stars. But there are a lot of things that I did like about it. Like once I saw them actively together, I really did like that. I really loved the exchanges over emails. That's the whole thing that I don't want to spoil. So if you guys decide to give it a read, I definitely think it's interesting. I felt like some of the friends could have been fleshed out a bit more. It's just like with You Should See Me in a Crown. I felt like we could have had more. We could have delved a little bit more into the backgrounds of these friends. The friend that she starts to make in class, I think, I loved that because there are relationships that are just like relegated to class only. So I did like that. But I did also wish that we learned more about him. Like we saw more of their conversations between or like before or after class and stuff like that. Her best friend, Erin, best friend and roommate, I liked her and I loved her response once she actually found out about Jacqueline's assault. I thought she was really good. I thought that a lot of things in this book was handled very well. There's a scene with sorority sisters, and I won't delve too deeply into that, again, for the sake of spoilers, but with a sorority, a chapter of the sorority on the college. And I really loved the speech, though, that was given about sexual assault. And I thought this book was so well done. All of the books that I've read, I appreciate that there was no slut shaming. None of these heroines were like, yeah, but I'm like, not like other girls. You didn't have to put down other girls to show how good of a character you were. This was something that I really appreciated. And when it did happen in Easy. It wasn't from Jacqueline, it was from other women judging her and saying like, oh yeah, no, she's probably just sleeping around, like, because obviously she can't have been assaulted. And that is so upsetting, but so true to form for so many women, and it's really upsetting. And I loved how this book addresses that, like, women need to be there for each other. One of the other reasons why this isn't more highly rated for me is how vague it was on the details. I know it takes place in the South, but I don't actually know anything about it. There are no clues, like at the very least, like the state, if you don't want to get into details on like the city and stuff like that, there were no details on the campus. I would have loved to know just like more, tell me about a little bit, but not a lot, about the architecture, or it wasn't painted vividly, a lot of the scenery. And I think that this happened in #TheRealCinderella, as I mentioned in a review that I did maybe a week or so ago. Maybe this is the author's desire to keep the story as relatable as possible, but I think that it's relatable when it has unique things, because not every, even if you keep out a lot of distinguishing details, not everybody's story is the same. And so I feel like it grounds the story more in reality, and we end up finding more to relate to by having all of these details, or we can better imagine the situation, and we may not want to necessarily imagine ourselves in the setting that Jacqueline finds herself, but it becomes more real to us when there are more details, or that's how I feel anyway. Jacqueline doesn't have the best relationship with her mom, and I also love the portrayal, like, so the past 3 books showed fairly close family relationships, just in different way. I really enjoyed how different each familial relationship was. But and this also includes the fact that Jacqueline is not close to her parents, but I love the way her mom comes through at the end. And it was just, yeah, it was a really good book. As I said, though, there were things that kept me from loving it. But overall, I would recommend all of the books that I have listed. I will put all of them in the description. I'm also currently reading The Boyfriend Project. I cannot think of the author's name right now. I will put that in the description as well. But it's a book that I'm also enjoying. I will probably do a review for it when I'm all done. But I will say that thus far, I'm loving just like a pure Black romance. There's like Black friendship, like just all of the women being friends, and that's cool. So it's a tentative recommendation. I haven't actually finished it yet, so we'll see if it stays true and just like stays good to the end. But thus far, I'm really enjoying it, so thus far I recommend. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you soon.